Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of In the Lounge here, hoopslounge.com. Myself, Phil Boileau, aka Sporting Phil, and Justin Rowan, aka Cavs Anida. Hit him up on Twitter. He's a good follow. We're covering the last week that was the NBA. A lot of stories went down, but I've got to pass the baton to Justin because the biggest one, presumably, happened not too long ago. Everyone was thinking Cleveland has the clear path to the finals, but not things are a little rocky there in Cleveland. You want to break it down, Justin?
Well, I don't think anyone thinks the path to the finals has changed, but it was pretty clear after they lost to Golden State on Monday that at the moment they're not in the same tier as the Spurs or Warriors when it comes to actually coming away with a championship. So the Cavs did something that I guess there's been rumblings about for the last year and a half, but this was the timing of firing David Blatt was a little bit surprising. The biggest thing that has consistently been reported all over the internet is that it was a clash between the team, all of the players, management, and David Blatt. Blatt was brought on to mentor Andrew Wiggins, Kyrie Irving, and Dion Waiters, and hopefully build a contender someday. And then they brought on LeBron. They traded Wiggins. They got Kevin Love, and the whole agenda completely changed.
Yeah, exactly. What I was saying, from what I've been hearing from outside sources, is that, had they stayed with that young nucleus, he would have been the ideal coach. But when you brought on these guys, they wanted someone with a little bit more NBA pedigree, and perhaps that caused that little bit of a rift where, the team started going towards Camp Lue instead of Camp Blatt because of his experience in the NBA. Where do you think this leaves Cleveland and Blatt kind of going forward?
I think what we're hearing today, Tyronn Lue just had a press conference where he said, I don't know how differently things are going to be run, but they're going to be better, which it's
well, at least the
weird.
Players are going to listen to him, right?
Right.
Theoretically.
So even if he's not as good of an X's and O's coach, if this is somebody that the players can buy into, a good manager of personalities, I think that's more valuable at this stage of the game. I think when you really have someone that's sound with X's and O's, that's somebody that's developing certain players, the younger players. You see the most successful coaches, Phil Jackson, Pat Riley, Greg Popovich. These are guys that handle and manage personalities well, and I think that's the most important thing especially when you have these kind of mega teams. So I think that's what we're going to see. Tyronn Lue came out and said the biggest change that's going to happen is more touches for Kevin Love at the elbow. They're going to utilize him the way that they used him in Minnesota. So I think we're going to see the team go away from some of that isolation basketball and really commit to ball movement.
And those assist numbers should go up for presumably Kyrie and LeBron, the same thing. And Kevin Love could be happy. I remember that's always been the issue, right? They'll have games where they'll make it work, but do people believe they can get all three kind of going all at the same time? Now, when we're speaking of Blatt, now he's obviously a capable coach. Where do you see his future lying?
He's obviously going to land on his feet. He's still going to be paid by the Cavs for a little while. If he wants another NBA job, he's going to get it. I think the ideal landing spot for him would probably be with the Timberwolves. Ironically,
following Andrew Wiggins to the other.
Yeah, developing the player that he was.
They actually are rebuilding with actually better tools than what would have been available to him in Cleveland had that retooling been happening.
Oh, absolutely. So I think that would be a really good spot for him. But it comes down to what he wants to do. I mean, he is a very accomplished coach. Maybe he kind of feels he wasn't cut out for the NBA, the media circus that follows it. Who knows? But I think Minnesota would probably be the perfect landing spot for him, given the fact that you'd be a little bit out of the spotlight. He gets to develop the players. I think that's a good position for him to start to lay some solid roots, because Cleveland, I mean, it's a circus on and off the court all the time. It's certainly never boring, but it's not a traditional NBA market. especially with LeBron there. So I think a little more normal of a situation would benefit him in Minnesota.
Absolutely. Now, shifting focuses to maybe a bigger NBA market, we saw Josh Smith is making his way back to the Houston Rockets. Josh Smith, after bouncing around from Atlanta, Detroit, Houston, we thought he was gonna be some kind of an answer there. I had my doubts with the Clippers, but obviously that didn't work out. Why do you think the Clippers ultimately ended up moving Josh Smith, and what do you think he brings, or is this kind of a step towards something else there in Houston?
I think Josh Smith being there is largely kind of a precursor to moving one of their other forwards. They have Montehunis, Terrence Jones, Capella. They got a lot of guys there, and that are going to require contract extensions. So I think this is a bit of a security blanket, allowing them to explore the trade markets and move one of those guys. I don't think it moves the needle in terms of a championship. I think the Rockets are kind of in a third tier. Warriors and Spurs in that top tier, kind of Clippers, Thunder in that second one, and then the Rockets are behind that. But who knows? Maybe the next move they make is one that makes a big difference. But it did stink of a little bit of desperation in my eyes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in both cases, I think you could say something about locker room issues there with the Clippers. And they have so much talent that maybe they just needed a little bit more of a reshuffle. And then obviously with the Rockets needing maybe that bigger name with some other guys struggling. Who knows? I mean, he did have some success there in Houston, so it's not something that comes out of nowhere. But I mean, the story that everyone's talking about, the NBA All-Star starters have been voted in, and with some surprise and some things that almost happened. We almost saw Zaza Pachulia getting to start for the West, and we almost saw Enes Kanter. He wasn't actually that far behind. So maybe let's just start with the starters. So we're seeing a definite move from, and we've been seeing this over the last couple of years, over having the big men having a prominent role to having smaller players. I mean, the tallest player I think on the court, unless I'm wrong, is Kevin Durant on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of the starters, and he's a small forward. I mean, him and LeBron James obviously can play some power forward, but they're small forwards. Where do you think this leaves the NBA and the future of like big men in general? Because there's a lot of guys who are up for some big money, and then we saw, including this week, kind of the hack-a-shack being brought on Andre Drummond, where he had to take a ton of free throws. Do you think the NBA? I mean, it's already kind of going that way, but do you think the center is gone the way of the dodo, and B, where do you feel with the kind of NBA voting as it is fan voting, or should it be more of a traditional thing?
I'm fine with fan voting. The only thing that I saw that I really didn't like was Kyle Lowry essentially got it. Kyle Lowry deserved to start. In my opinion, Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler are the deserving starters when it comes to guards in the East. But Kyle Lowry won essentially because I believe he works for Apple, posted an iPhone giveaway, gave away 3 iPhones to somebody that retweeted his tweet, and that got about 90,000 retweets, and Kyle Lowry won the vote by 66. So that's not really who the fans want to see. If the fans want to see Zaza Pachulia, I think that's hilarious. Troll the hell out of the game. In my opinion, your first, second, and third All-NBA teams, that's more indicative to how good these players are than All-Star. All-Star is just for the fans. If the fans want to see somebody funny, if they want to see JaVale McGee or Nick Young in there, go ahead and vote for it. But when you
saw this in other sports too, like the NHL, the whole fiasco that Montreal stuck with their HL 6'8" player being voted the starter of the division. But I digress. We'll be back to the NBA.
Right. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with them trolling it. But because I mean the other 7 get selected in, but I just didn't like kind of buying off votes, even if it did get the deserving candidate in. It just doesn't sit well with me. But at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. He certainly deserved it. If anybody didn't deserve it, I'd say it's Dwayne Wade. Wade's kind of been hurting the team a little bit when he's on the court. There's kind of rumblings about how he fits into their future and all that. And Miami really only deserves one All-Star, and that's Chris Bosh. So it's going to be interesting to see if Bosh gets snubbed as a result of it. Kobe, I mean, he's obviously not a very good player anymore. But there's
the
obviously
fans have spoken, and he was the
yeah,
number one player voted in, right?
right. It's who the people want to see. It's kind of funny to hear people go, "Oh, it ruins the game. Nobody's going to want to watch." No, that's who they wanted to see. It's his farewell tour. I don't really
Well, he's
have a
meant
big
so
problem
much to
with
the
it.
NBA for years, right? It's kind of and it's interesting because he scored his 81 points in Toronto. There is that tie there, so it's kind of a feel good story all around for the NBA. Less so maybe this 1 year in terms of deserving, but yeah, I can definitely see that. I don't know. I just feel at a certain level, it's interesting how the starters are for the fans and the bench are for the coaches, but then are they mandated to play this like if they just voted in, five, I don't want to call them joke players, but like five Zaza Pachulias, are the coaches, do you think, mandated to play these guys like a certain amount, like
No,
because the fans vote them in, or they're just like, wow, that was a bad idea, guys. You'll start and next whistle, you're gone.
well, I mean that's kind of what they did to Fat Kyle Lowry last year. He didn't exactly play well and was benched pretty early on for Irving and John Wall. Or no, John Wall started, but for other options, I should say. And they kind of did the same thing with when Allen Iverson got voted in well past his prime back in the day. So they're not really mandated to play these guys a ton. So I guess the fans aren't exactly seeing who they voted for. But yeah, I mean, it's a stupid self promotion of the league. That's all Star really is. I do think they need to get rid of it as kind of being used as a bit of a Hall of Fame qualification. But then again, I think that's a bit of a straw man argument because I've never seen someone get into the Hall of Fame because someone's like, well, he's an 8-time All-Star. I mean, Joe Johnson's not getting into the Hall of Fame because of his All-Star
Well, I'm
appearances.
sure he thinks he will, and his bank account thinks he will. Just saying.
Hmm.
But yeah, but there are some other names that are kind of interesting. I mean, Kobe Bryant was, because how they vote now, obviously they don't have centers; they have front court and back court. And Kobe Bryant was voted in as a front court player. I just thought it would have been interesting had he bumped out, Curry or Westbrook for one of those spots, because
Yeah, I'm really, really glad that they moved him as a front court player. I think that really helps because guards typically is where there's a bit more of a logjam. I mean, Mike Conley's never been an all-star. And to answer your question earlier on about if we're seeing kind of the end of the center era, I remember a couple of years ago, people were saying you can't win a championship with a point guard as your best player because it hadn't happened for a long time. And you think about that, you digest it. It's just kind of for the past few years, the best player in the game or the players in the discussion haven't been a point guard. Steve Nash probably wins a title if he doesn't get his face broken, and Stoudemire gets suspended and
Robert
DL gets
Horry.
suspended.
I'll
Yeah,
always remember Horry for that play more than any big shot.
the biggest shot he ever took was that one. But I mean, we saw Steph Curry. He won a championship as a point guard. So that kind of kills that. It's wherever the talent is. And I think when you look at who's coming into the NBA, you've got Karl Anthony Towns, who's completely like the modern NBA center, just so talented, all the potential in the world to be a potential MVP. Anthony Davis is probably going to eventually transition into being a center. That talent's just coming up. It's on the way up. Right now, the talent isn't there.
Well, and Kristaps Porzingis, right? Same kind of thing.
Exactly. Kristaps is going to be a center as well. So the talent just isn't there. So coaches use whatever players work best. Right now, it's a very guard-heavy league. It's a very perimeter-oriented league. And teams that have centers as their cornerstone, it's not that they can't play them.
Unless you're the Philadelphia 76ers, because you may have too many of them. But
too many cooks.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. And I was thinking about it because I was thinking of the different teams that win, and it all seems to have guys who are very dominant ball handlers as well. Like Kevin Durant, even though he hasn't won a championship, adding that ball handling has really, really improved his game. And LeBron James, having won a championship, is often a primary ball handler on his own team. And going forward into next year's draft. We have Ben Simmons, number one, 6'10", kind of a LeBron James-esque mold, ball handler. A bunch of the
Lamar.
other, yeah, so that kind of player. And the other guys in the top three are all like 6'10" and above. So it does have kind of this flow of where the talent comes from. So it's a really interesting point, actually. Like we saw that kind of group of young point guards coming up, your Currys, Westbrooks, and then we're seeing our big guys coming back in the game with the Drummonds, Cousins, Davis, Towns, and so it is kind of,
Exactly.
yeah, so it is kind of flowing. And so I guess it's like whoever can, take. And it's interesting, right? Because all those players that I mentioned who are the point guards who came before those bigs are now coming into their prime. So the coaches are just maximizing on the fact that the best players happen to be point guards who happen to be in their prime right now, who are going to, produce at the highest level. Whereas, guys like Davis, Cousins, Drummond, as good as they're doing, aren't doing quite as well as they predictably will do once they meet that same age.
Right, exactly.
So it's an interesting thing there. I want to bring it back to the East just quick, because one thing that kind of stuck out for me outside of the other players we mentioned was Carmelo Anthony. Kind of an interesting pick. I see it. I definitely see why the fans vote for him. He's definitely a fan favorite. But do you think he was worthy of a starter spot?
You know what? I think so. I think this Carmelo Anthony we've seen this season, the only argument, I guess, against him would be the fact that they're not in a playoff position yet, except they're just about a half game out of the 8 seed. So that's a little bit of a blurred line. Who
He's
knows
passing
what
the ball for once.
he's passing the ball. He's playing a good team game. I've always thought Carmelo kind of got the short end of the stick. I don't think his teams have been very good. I think you can build around him, especially if he's playing in his perfect position, which in my eyes is power forward. I think that's a really good spot, and he's still a devastating scorer. He's playing the best team ball. He's saying all the right things. He's turning into the leader he always should have been. So for those reasons, I'm fine with him being there. There's so many worthy candidates, especially when it comes to the front court, that someone deserving is going to get snubbed. The fans want to see Carmelo, so I guess that's the tiebreaker when you're looking at other guys, like let's say Al Horford, for example.
Oh, exactly. So there's a lot of interesting talent going that way. Now, I just want to pull it back to the actual festivities themselves. Now, obviously, they haven't named all the participants in every section, but what traditionally is the, event in the NBA All-Star Weekend that brings you the most joy and fandom and all the rest? I mean, we have so many to choose from. We could even go as casual as a celebrity game to, the Rising Stars game, the All-Star game, the talent competition. I mean, even being specific, what out of that really gets you going?
Well, I'm going to say that they ruined All-Star Weekend by getting rid of the shooting stars. They're scared of Chris Bosh. The reign of Bosh has been killed because they're not letting him do the shooting stars
I
competition.
personally hated that whole just jacking up from half court, because that's all it was, right? We're just like, oh, we're gonna hit a free throw, we're gonna hit a three. Now let's just bomb it from half court, and whoever can hit
But
half
Bosh
court
was always
shot.
hitting it. Bosh was always hitting it. He's
Okay, fine,
money.
but that's not
So
indicative of talent. That's like I guess, but I'm sure there are players in the NBA who are great half court shooters who are not great NBA players. And does that
I
mean
know
that
it was just funny. Like it's just for fun. I think you're taking it way too seriously, which is it was one of the stupidest competitions. So that's why it gave me some joy. Honestly, I like the whole Saturday for the most part. 3-point shootouts really fun to me. Slam dunk competition, I think everyone's a little bit jaded, and if you just kind of take it for what it is and remember or try to forget all the slam dunks in the past, because we've seen so much. There's only so much people can do, and to see last year, especially with Zach LaVine and that, it was kind of a throwback to just raw talent, and I thought that was a lot of fun. I'm not a big fan of the actual game. I think the fourth quarter is usually fun, but the whole Saturday, skills competition, 3-point shootout, slam dunk, to me, that's my favorite day of All-Star Weekend.
I kind of like the idea of the kind of like Canada versus US idea. I thought that was kind of an interesting marketing ploy,
Yeah, that's
personally
cool.
there. And it's definitely going to get some hype there and get some, nationalism going and some competition. And it's going to get people invested because, as much as the All-Star game has this kind of aura around it, every sport, like, I don't know, do you think it's a festivity that's kind of maintained its popularity, is rising, or is dipping a bit? Because if I kind of have to put a feeler out there, I think people aren't as jazzed up about All-Star as they once were. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, there's a possibility for that. I think because now it's become a bit of an establishment, whereas before, like the NBA was really trying to market itself more and more, and that was the reason that All Star was ever put into place. But I think through kind of the Magic Bird era, Jordan, all that, like I think All Star kind of encaptured some of or encapsulated the kind of the building momentum of the NBA. Now that the NBA's arrived in many sense of the word, I think it's kind of flatlining a little bit. I think it's maintained popularity. It's always the same people, but maybe they need to find something else to get that extra little bit of jazz that they need to bring in new viewers. But for people that watch the NBA, All Star still is kind of a fixture